Welcome to another episode of BC Brew on Tap from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. Our guest is Rod Hughes, who is the head brewer of R&B Brewing. Rod, we talk on this show about the explosion of craft beer, primarily in the greater Vancouver area. But when you go back in time, R&B Brewing, of which you represent, you guys would have to be, I don't know, the granddaddies of the craft movement. Would you say that's fair?
We've been around since one of the original breweries, post-Prohibition.
So post-Prohibition. Yeah. So you 1997 is when you guys started. So again, if the landscape, if I remember correctly from talking to other guests in the show, there wasn't a whole lot around. And nobody back in 97 could foresee what is going on in 2016.
Yeah, it's definitely a different ballgame now. R&B was lucky to be there around the early days, offering people something different than the macro beers we were offering at the time. And I think that really solidified them as part of the community.
I give a lot of credit to people that set down roots and invested in what seemed to be probably kind of a frivolous adventure back then, because you had a couple of the big players in the beer scene. And that was it. So if somebody came along and said, no, I'm going to kind of do something on a smaller scale, kind of do it more in the craft family, there's probably a lot of people shaking their head going, you're crazy. Why would you try and compete with the big people? And now look at where the scene is. And I know that you came from Ontario. That was where you grew up. So when you came to BC, what was your first impression when you looked at what was around on the beer landscape? Were you blown away?
I was absolutely blown away. I wasn't really into beer too much before I got here. But when I got here, I started drinking Fat Tug. I started drinking Central City's IPA. And I lived right down the street from Dan's Homebrewing. Got into homebrewing myself. Started getting into the Vancouver craft beer scene, and here I am today.
I think that's kind of interesting. You basically weren't really into beer at the time, and yet now it's almost like you got the keys to your parents' car. Like you're running the show as the head brewer at R&B, which again is one of the founders. So what was the turning point? What made you decide? Okay, not only do I enjoy this style of beer or these kinds of beers, I'm going to start brewing them myself, and eventually one day I'm going to be a head brewer.
Yeah, I mean, it just started as a hobby. I have a chemistry background, so it kind of came natural to me. I just found it really exciting to mess around with different recipes and really research in depth the science behind it. I had a day job as a groundwater chemist at the time. Just kind of started fantasizing about brewing as a career. And
so it's funny that you should have a chemistry background, because even though we joke about this, there's a lot of science that goes into beer. Whether you're a home brewer, maybe not so much, but when you start to get the big operations behind those, there's a lot of stuff that you need to know.
Yeah, definitely. And even as a home brewer, you can really get into it, and that's what I really found fun about it. Homebrewing is a great hobby that you can do kind of just very superficially and really make good beer, but you can really get into it and make great beer.
Now, when you make beer, especially when you've got a company which has the history of, say, R&B, are you allowed to pretty much have the run of the tanks and just go, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Is it dictated by the market? Is it dictated by the consumer? Is it dictated by the company mandate? Basically, or is it a collaboration of all of those kind of factors?
I'd say it's a collaboration between all the factors. You definitely have to have enough beer for your existing accounts. You want to keep everyone happy. And when there's room to make something new, everyone's got to agree on if it's the right path or not. I
always like asking brewers this, because do you take this stuff personally? Like if, for example, Rod, you sit and go, this is such a good beer, but it doesn't move. The market just doesn't take to it. You have to discontinue it. Does that offend you, or do you go, oh well, you live and learn?
It doesn't really offend me. I'm not saying I don't, take people's opinions seriously. I do kind of, probably think about that a little too much, right. But yeah, I wouldn't be offended by that at all. If it's not moving, we've got to sell beer, and that's what's got to happen. Yeah.
Okay, now you're located in the Brewery Creek area of Vancouver, and what I like about R&B is that you've got some very, very Vancouver-specific beers. For example, your Vancouver Special IPA. if you didn't live in Vancouver in the era, you probably don't know what a Vancouver Special is. I grew up in one. I totally know what one is. And then you've got one like the Dude Chillin'. This is the new beer to you.
Yes.
So, and this is based out on Dude Chillin' Park in East Van.
Absolutely, yeah. So
where do those ideas come from?
So the Vancouver Special was named by Dave Fenn, our owner. He just thought it'd be great, like to tie in the neighborhood with the names of our beers.
Which is a very, very Vancouver-specific beer. People probably in other provinces in Canada don't even know what a Vancouver Special is. Google it, check it out. You'll know exactly what I mean. And okay, and Dude Chillin', this is there's a Dude Chillin' Park in Vancouver. How did that idea come about?
So I've had this recipe for a pale ale that I've just been waiting to bring to R&B, and with the opening of our ale and pizza house, it felt like the right time. It felt like it would fit well in our lineup. The name actually came from my wife. She kind of gave me that name, and I thought it was great. It's a park that we hang out with. My wife and I hang out in, as well as the brewers and I after work. It's really close to our brewery. And it's got a good story behind it. So.
Well, if you've ever been to Dude Chillin' Park, I would imagine you'd sell a few bottles of that. Have you actually done any test marketing in Dude Chillin' Park? Hey, people, try this out?
Not yet. We did bring a couple growlers there. I mean, yeah.
and you mentioned the pizza and ale house, and I'm hearing good things about pizzas there. I've had one.
Absolutely.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
And there's great pizza, and as well there's a great variety of beers.
Absolutely, yeah. The Ale and Pizza House is doing really well right now. We're really excited about it. We think it's a really good room to hang out.
Took a while to get going, but it's finally up and running. That's all good.
It did, yeah.
Okay, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Cheers.
There is more BC Brew on Tap coming up. Welcome back to BC Brew on Tap. One thing we always enjoy doing on the show is showing just how adaptable and how practical beer is, especially in the cocktail scene. Cam Bogue is the beverage director of Earl's Restaurants. We're here at the Loft in Earl's, Yaletown. Cam, pleasure to see you again, sir.
Likewise.
Beverage director for the Earl's Restaurant Company. That's a pretty lofty title. So when you look at the beverage list, what percentage does beer play in consumption, or when you're stocking the bar? How important is craft beer?
Beer's huge. It's 11% of our sales. So it's a little bit less than spirits, but more than wine.
And when you look to beers, obviously you're the final decider here.
Yeah.
What is it you're looking for to offer customers?
We definitely have some regionality. Our preferences in urban market versus suburban market are going to be completely different. We're going to definitely be more lager heavy, a little bit more user friendly in suburban markets, and then we'll be a little bit more adventurous in the urban scenes or places that are more trendsetters.
So here in the Lower Mainland, are we a lager town? I hear we're an IPA town. Is that reasonably fair?
I'd say we were an IPA town, but I think we're moving past that. I think now getting into a lot of the Belgian beers, the yeasty beers, and sours will be making a presence. So
okay,
definitely experimental.
We're going to utilize your great skills as a man behind the bar as well to not only make something good with beer, but pair it in a cocktail form. So you're going to do a few and show how diverse beer can be.
These are recipes we just made today, though.
These are fresh off the bat. Okay, all right. So Cam, what are we going to start with?
I like classics. Okay. So like everything we are going to try are just riffs on classics that we're using beer to lengthen the cocktail in place of soda or juices or pops or something else.
Okay.
So I just thought about cocktails that would pair extremely well with a type of beer.
Okay.
So each of these that we're going to do has a different beer that we're utilizing in it.
Okay, but only one is going to be shaken.
Yeah, this one we're going to do is a riff on a Ramos Gin Fizz.
Okay, let's
Ramos Gin Fizz, super old school cocktail. We'll start making this with just 1 ounce of Tanqueray. Okay. And this is a beer or a drink that has egg whites, different ingredients that you have to shake really hard. So we'll give this a good shake, and then it's usually lengthened with soda water. Okay. So instead of soda water, we're going to use an IPA. Okay. So here we're going to use a 3/4 ounce pour of our egg whites. We're going to then have a 3/4 ounce pour of fresh squeezed lemon juice, followed by another 3/4 ounces of simple syrup.
Now, I must ask you, as you do this, you literally created these, within the hour.
I did, but this is a classic recipe. Okay. So we're starting with a drink that's a tried and true old school drink. Okay. So yes, this I modified a little bit. It was usually 1.5 ounces of gin. I cut it back so the gin wasn't overbearing on the beer itself, and we're also going to get a little bit more ABV from the beer.
Okay.
So there's no need to keep upping that. So the gin's down to about 1 ounce, 3/4 simple, 3/4 lemon, 3/4 egg whites. Now we're going to add 2 dashes of orange flower water, which also goes great with an IPA, right? Like think of all those hops and tropical hops, especially the one we're going to use, will go really well with that. Finally, we're going to add a 3/4 ounce pour of cream before we give this a good shake.
Yeah, we need to see some shaking. That's
Then we shake this. What we want to do is pack the glass all the way to the top with ice. We're going to take our glass and we're going to serve the drink in. We're also going to pack that with ice itself because we really want the fresh ice on the top. So all this ice that we're going to shake, we're going to beat up.
okay.
And then we're going to pour it over some fresh ice. So this I want to give it a good shake to emulsify those egg whites.
Okay, that's well shaken.
That it is. So before all the foam settles from the egg whites, we're going to pour this directly over top of our fresh ice. And then we're going to top this with some IPA.
Okay.
And the IPA we're going to top it with is Red Racer's new Super Stellar IPA that's topped with Mosaic and Citra, so super tropical, super citrusy.
Yeah.
Want me to give that a go?
Sure. And that is the finished product.
Yeah, this is the finished product. So it sounds confusing. There's about 6 or 7 different ingredients in it, but it is pretty simple. Almost equal parts, traditional Ramos Gin Fizz lengthened with Red Racer Super Stellar IPA.
Okay, that's drink number 1.
Next, twist on a Dark and Stormy. So Dark and Stormy.
That's a good drink to begin with. Yeah.
Yes. So this one's a citrusy drink, so kind of summery but spicy, so good on those rainy days that we have. Here we have Appleton's VX, so an aged rum. We have a little bit of lime juice. We have ginger syrup, which is just a simple syrup with ginger pureed in it, pretty simple. And then we're lengthening this with the Strange Fellows Wit, so a Belgian wit beer.
Nice.
Good stuff.
How much trial and error is there in these drinks when you make them?
Oh, you saw it. It was about 30 minutes before you arrived.
30 minutes. But I mean, it's obviously got to be the right combination. A little bit too much of this or not enough of that can really have an impact.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm definitely being a bit quick, but yeah, some drinks do come extremely fast and some are a pain in the ass. Some actually never get where I want them to be.
Okay.
So when we're starting with something that's classic, we actually know that it's going to be somewhat balanced. If we're starting with something creative or just flavors or pairings we want to work with, sometimes it's trial and error and you're just modifying small amounts.
I'm figuring this is something in the Caesar family.
Yeah, extremely traditional michelada. So michelada means my iced beer in Spanish. My iced beer is just a beer that's served over ice with different sorts of spices in it. Here you'll see them now with clamato and everything else in it, but this one is turned red only because of Valentina. So we have Valentina hot sauce, some fresh squeezed lime juice, and then Maggi. So Maggi, a seasoner very similar to soy sauce, but made with wheat.
Should I be afraid?
No, so that's my favorite out of the 4.
Yeah.
My problem with those is I can't put them down. When it's not in my hand, I'm like angry that I set it down.
So in your experience, Cam, and certainly when you look to bring beers into the restaurants, do you find that there's so much good stuff now? It's kind of a competition, and it's kind of tough on you to decide what is good enough to actually be on tap at Earl's?
Extremely, because there's so many good brewers in BC. We support everything from larger guys like Phillips. We were key in helping Parallel 49 grow. I was part of them when they first started, and we're continuing that, like partnering with guys as small as 33 acres in Pal Street. We were working with Pal Street when they had a 5-gallon brew house, and we were just pouring it here at Yaletown.
Well, one final question, because it doesn't seem like the beer scene is going to slow down anytime soon. So is it going to be tougher for people to get shelf space and to get tap room in places, or do you think that there's such a good industry going that the more the merrier?
I think it depends on the venue. So yes, the amount of taps the place has is going to be challenging for most people, but the people that do serve craft beer and then craft beer consumers like change, so they're going to be constantly rotating. So it's a bit of give and take. Like it's hard for brewers because they're not going to have that static line. They're always going to have a consistent paycheck from, but they will get the placement because people want to switch it up all the time.
Next time you're doing a little trial and error with craft beer, will you give me a shout?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Cam.
Thank you.
Cheers. More BC Brew on tap on Shot coming up.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew on Tap provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
We're here at Trading Post Brewing in Langley. This is the first brewer in this huge area. Lance is the operator and Tony is the brewmaster. Welcome to Brew on Tap. How are you guys?
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Pleasure. Now, you guys are pioneers here in an area that is such a massive area. You'd be surprised to think there's only one brewery, and it's you guys. What prompted you to open up Langley?
Well, my wife and I, Marissa, moved into Vancouver a few years back and fell in love with the craft brewing scene. And so when we moved back to Langley, where we're both from, it was just a huge gaping hole we saw in Langley for craft beer. Surrey has a bunch of craft breweries, Abbotsford and Chilliwack have a bunch, but Langley was just a dark hole in craft beer. So we saw the opportunity and took it.
Tony, we were talking before we started recording today, and I was just kind of saying that to be a brewmaster, you kind of need a bit of science, bit of agriculture background, and all of that. You're basically playing here off the heritage of the area.
I really am trying to do that. So I live in Langley as well. I have a 50-acre farm doing blueberries and raspberries down in the southeast corner of Langley. And I'm very aware that our food comes from this part of the world for the lower mainland. So I'd like to have the direct relation to that sort of thing and present ideas that use the agriculture as part of the idea for the beer that comes out of it.
So from a perspective of the operator's point of view, do you sort of defer to the brewmaster, or do you yourself say, well, I tend to lean these styles of beers, Tony, can you go and make me those?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Tony's a fantastic brewer. He's one of the best technical brewers in BC, if not Canada. So we have never thought that a beer there's not a beer that Tony can't make. So when we were first sitting down and discussing what our portfolio would look like, we knew we wanted to be innovative and pushing the boundaries on some beers. Tony's very well known to just push boundaries on styles that people may not want to dabble in, and he's very good at it.
Okay, well, we've got a flight in front of us here, Tony. What is Trading Post known for?
Well, I would say first and foremost, we're known for our lager. So we call it the 1827 Munich Helles lager, and it uses traditional floor malted barley that's of a type that's called Hanko. It predates industrialization. It directly relates back to a time when agricultural products were chosen and picked and grown for flavor characteristics and not yield per acre or pest resistance or anything that comes from the industrialization of everything, these times that we live in. But we're also known for, say, this dark tart farmhouse style ale. It's an experimental ale that I believe uses a technique that was unknown in this part of the world. And I made 2 batches, one I soured, one I didn't, and then I combined them, and they give more complexity to the beer in a shorter time period.
Now, I've often joked about the fact that I'm kind of late to the sour party. I can stick a toe in the water, and I can appreciate one maybe being a little bit tastier to me than the other. But by and large, it's just an area of beer that I just don't, it's kind of like vegetables. I love some vegetables, but I hate cauliflower, for example, okay? So do you find that all people like all things, or there's some very specific taste preferences? I mean, do you find that in your perspective?
Yeah, there's very specific taste preferences. So because we're in Langley, it's a population that's not surrounded by craft breweries. So we're trying to educate people in terms of what craft beer really is. So our lagers are our best seller just because it's an approachable beer. It's a beer that people that are drinking mass-produced beer can relate to and can appreciate. But it's also a beer where a craft beer connoisseur can come in and appreciate as well for the highest quality ingredients that we use in it. That said, we're trying to create an environment here where we're not just known for safe beers, but we want to be known for
dangerous
innovative.
beers.
Yeah, well, not dangerous out of the crazier, but yeah, edgier that we're pushing the boundaries.
I must ask, I mean, if a chef comes out when the meal is served, how was everything? I mean, sometimes you're reluctant to give an honest appraisal if it wasn't up to your standards. If someone was to say, well, to be honest with you, I don't like this style of beer, does a brewmaster, do you take that personally, or is that just part of the game?
Oh, that's totally part of the game. And then what you want to do is talk to the person, find out the kind of beer that's that is appealing to them and make sure that that beer goes into their hand and into their body. When you present an array of beers, some people are going to have more affinity towards certain flavors and less affinity to others. That's completely normal, but we want people to experience new flavors to them as well. So sometimes you don't know that, oh, I don't like dark beers, or I don't like tart beers or anything, but at least try this one and see that, oh, I don't like this particular one, not say, oh, I don't like IPAs as a style.
Well, I used to be that guy. Now that's all I drink is IPA. So people can change. You can teach an old dog new tricks.
A personal evolution of flavor appreciation that happens for each person. I believe the craft beer scene is something that elevates that experience.
Lance, where can people find Trading Post Tasting Room?
Yeah, so we are starting to expand, but for the tasting room, we're located at 64th and 200th Street in Langley, so right in the heart of Langley.
And then there's the edible version of Trading Post in Fort Langley.
Yes, we have a second location where we have our eatery, and that's in Fort Langley.
Thanks, guys. Congrats.
Thanks, Joe. Cheers.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap, provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew on Tap, provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
Welcome back to BC Brew on Tap from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. Back for season 2 of the big show. Our buddy, Mr. Jay Schreiber, Mr. Smarty Punch.
How you doing, Joe? I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
Good to see you. This is kind of the segment where we kind of go, not really behind the scenes, but you kind of throw something kind of different at me, explain the beer culture. Now, today we're in an area which I'm digging because if I have one style of beer I particularly love, it's IPAs.
Well, yeah, exactly. IPAs are a great gateway beer for people who don't know very much about craft beer. IPAs became super popular in the West Coast here because of the hop fields we have on the West Coast. The Cascade region, which stretches down to Washington, Oregon, has a super output of hops that are coming out right now. And this style became popular. The IPA stands for India Pale Ale. It was actually made by the British first. I don't know if you knew that, Joe, but the British first made it, and they made it so that they could circumnavigate the globe to India, and they did so by adding twice as many hops. Hops being an actual preservative, actually preserved the beer all the way there, and then they just kept the style around as an India Pale Ale.
Okay, well, we have before us 3 different IPAs. Now, we're starting with my go-to.
Your go-to, Fat Tug.
You can't find too many bars in the Vancouver and actually BC area that don't actually have Fat Tug.
Correct. Fat Tug I've always called BC's IPA. It is, it's a beer that people have gotten to know as it's kind of the go-to IPA. It is available, like you said, at most bars and pubs in the Vancouver area and across BC. Driftwood being from Vancouver Island, they've done a great job with this rebranding. I love the logo they've done here. Their logos used to be a little more basic, more square, but they have a great logo on the bottles, and it's still consistently one of the best-selling IPAs there is on the market.
Moving to Delta, every time you hear of some of the more popular brands of beer, Four Winds is always on that list.
Four Winds can do no wrong. They've won. You win a Canadian Beer Award and best brewery in Canada for a reason. Their commitment to quality, their clean branding, and their approachable styles, approachable left field styles, which is actually very, very cool that they've been able to strike that balance. This is a great go-to IPA. I really feel like they've exposed a lot of the flavors of hops that you can find. In terms of the hops that you can find here on the West Coast. So I definitely am a big advocate for this beer.
And we're going further down the West Coast.
We are going further down the West Coast. So this is actually a beer I brought from the States. This is a Breakside IPA. However, this is a beer that's commercially available in BC. I love this beer, and I love this beer because this beer was my Fat Tug. This was the beer that got me into IPAs. The flavors are really, really dynamic, and the characteristics of the beer just go so well, especially in food pairings, especially for those who love hopier beers. It's a very balanced, very drinkable IPA.
One final quick question.
Yeah.
When it comes to IPAs, the hoppiness to me, the hoppier the better. What is a safe level and what is off the charts ridiculous?
Well, IPAs I've seen anywhere from anywhere from about 45, 50 IBUs. IBUs being the International Bitterness Unit, goes between about 0 and 100. The IBUs of an IPA from about 45, 50, all the way up to about 100 or so. I'd say a safe balance is somewhere around 60 to 75. After 80, it's kind of hard to tell. There's extra hops in there. So.
IPAs, India Pale Ale. Mr. Smarty Pints, Jay Schreiber, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll see you again next show. And that is a wrap for BC Brew on Tap from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. Enjoy all that BC has to offer, but remember, please drink responsibly and always plan a safe ride home. We'll see you.
Clothing for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap supplied by Red Dragon Apparel. RedDragonApparel.com. BC Brew on Tap, this is Mike Schaefer.